Welcome to Burn the Ship. Burn the Ship podcast. Our goal here is to connect entrepreneurs with professionals that can help you go all in on your business. We talk to people that have walked the walk and talked the talk and been through all the things that we experience as small business owners. And our goal here is to kind of pass on some of those experiences and traits of successful entrepreneurs to the next generation of entrepreneurs or people that are listening to the podcast or anyone interested in the small business world. Fortunately for us, we've developed a network of people through existing clients, referrals, introductions that we've made to people near us. And we've put out a significant amount of content just related to furthering the adventures of entrepreneurs. So thanks for tuning in again. Thank you for spending some time with us, Joe, as well. Anybody that dedicates the time to spend with us and be of value to the audience does mean a lot to us. So I wanted to say that as well. It does mean a lot, and I appreciate you very much. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, introduce your business?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. And my name is Joe Walker, and I run a remote studio called Symbolic. Do 3D animation and design work. It started in 2018 after spending 5 years inside of an advertising agency running their motion to graphics or their motion design department. Before that, from 2003 to 2013, I was in Los Angeles doing visual effects and motion graphics, DVD, Blu-ray menu design, pretty much anything you can imagine that had to deal with post-production, we would do it. So that was an interesting 10 years of my life. Before then, from 1995 until 2003, I worked in post-production here in Montgomery, in Alabama, and I was fresh out of college, learned how to use After Effects to animate, and got hired on by a local post-production company. And that's been my career since I was a teenager, and I'll be 49 in April, creeping up on the big 50. I'm trying not to think about it and trying to fight it off with as much exercise and diet as I can. But
Sure.
but yeah, it's the last 5 years have been really interesting because it's been a mind shift from being a salaried employee with a company to running my own business and trying to figure out which direction I want to take it.
Sure. So who are your clients now? Like what are the people that are reaching out for animation, motion graphics, and design?
So surprisingly, and this is kind of interesting, is the people that I used to work for now contract with me to do the same work that I did when I worked for them. So that's one type of client that I have, and that really is built, I think, more out of having a good relationship with the people that I used to work with, and a good example of not burning bridges when you leave an employment with somebody, because there's plenty of opportunity there. They know you, they know how you work, so that's been a pretty healthy relationship that I keep with them. Some of the newer clients that I've had are smaller agencies that just need animation for social media, animation for product launches or promotional pieces, explainer animations, the typical motion graphics animation work that you've seen, pretty abundant in the last 10, 15 years. So one thing that's been kind of new in the last year and a half to 2 years has been a subscription service with the studio. It kind of took shape from retainers. It really became something that we were negotiating a retainer, and the more I looked at it, the more I thought, wow, this is just something that I could kind of productize and put into a subscription, and it would be easier for everybody. So that's something new that I've been doing with the business, which has kind of sent my pipeline in two directions. So I still have the product-based work, or the project-based work, where the billing invoicing is just typical. You tell me what you need to do, I'll give you a quote, do it that way. And then there's manufacturer clients that I have that just have volume. They've got 100 products or 200 or 300 products, or they have multiple brands. It may be a corporation that has 15 companies underneath it that all have their own packaging that need to be on Amazon, and point of sale and promotional animations. And so we got to kind of figuring out retainers for those clients for the year, and the subscription model just made more sense because I'm so streamlined and because I hire based on my volume and my needs. So I'm not keeping a full staff on right now. I just hire based on, the project comes in. I have animators and copywriters and sound and video guys that I'll reach out to help. And, it's very streamlined. So yeah, that subscription thing has been interesting because I get a lot of pushback in my industry about how, oh, well, you're not being able to charge the big budgets for animations that we typically do. And it's like, well, yes and no. I mean, it kind of evens out when you look at it from a retainer perspective. And then also it's very tailored to a specific type of client. So, if it's an agency that needs 3 or 4 animations a year, the subscription is not going to make sense. If it's a manufacturer that's, peppering you with 300 requests for renderings of products that they don't necessarily have a tight deadline on, but they just kind of trickle in through the year within the subscription model makes a lot of sense. So that's kind of where I am right now. I have some other ideas that I'm playing around with that aren't necessarily on paper yet, but I think with the way the industry is changing and the way that people are digesting content, it's going to be pretty effective. So, yeah.
Sure. What was the catalyst for you for taking on that entrepreneurship role? Like what was the thing that happened that made you go from salaried employee, comfortable position, good at your job, managing other people, I would assume, to
Sure.
the entrepreneur world?
So the agency that I was in house with, they're good friends of mine from back when I was doing post production in the late '90s. They were actually an agency that would come in and supervise edits with me for their typical jobs, which not a lot of stuff doesn't get run that way anymore. I mean, there's not the big budget edit suites that are getting booked by agencies as
Sure.
much, especially in smaller towns. But those guys have always been friends of mine. So when I came back from Los Angeles, I'd already been in talks with them about, hey, let's start up a motion graphics department. They have a really successful advertising agency. They've been around for 30 something years. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. So we did that for 5 years from 2013 to 2018. And the agencies and the companies that are building in-house studios now that are trying to bring everything in-house are finding out that it's not necessarily as cost effective depending on what their needs are. And so that was kind of something that we ran up against, where there was kind of a ceiling as far as what I was going to make in my career and my salary there with them, and it just kind of hit a ceiling. And there was things that I wanted to do. There were certain things that I wanted to see happen inside the agency that weren't happening. Nothing bad, but it was just sort of pipeline things like sales department, works a certain way, and trying to get a sales department inside of an established agency to understand, well, this is the type of work that you can do with animation. When you kind of get your mind out of traditional video and you start looking at the possibilities of animation and 3D design and bringing products into the digital world and making libraries of these products. And the more I talked to the sales department about that, it just wasn't clicking. It was they didn't understand it. They didn't know how they were going to make it work with their clients. It seemed too complicated. And so it reached a point where, salaries weren't going to increase. And I had to make a decision to go it alone, find another job somewhere else. Kind of those forks in the road that you typically run into when you've reached a crossroads. So I talked to the guy, my boss that worked there that I've known forever. And yeah, we just kind of parted ways and left with, the understanding that anything that they still needed in terms of motion graphics, I'd be glad to do it for them, on a contract type basis. So it was a good departure. But for me, it was, okay, do I really, what do I want to do? So I had to sit down and figure out, do I want to be an agency and kind of do the things that I had those conversations with inside the agency that I thought could have been different. And so that was a real possibility. And honestly, that's how I came out, was like, I wanted to be Symbolic Agency. Had the domain, had the email addresses, was ready to go. And the first pitch that we put together, it was more of a proposal than a pitch, but the first one we put together, and I started pulling together agency type resources. So we had a copywriter and we had a producer and we had all this stuff. We got to the end of that project and I was like, this is not, this is not
Sure.
how I want to run my business. And it wasn't that it's a bad thing. It was just, that's not where my passion lies. My passion has always been in animation and doing the design work and staying very niche in like 3D and motion design and After Effects and all of that kind of cool stuff. So I felt like the agency life was kind of pulling me in too many different directions, and I was losing that niche that I care so much about and that I'm so passionate about. So after about a year in, I switched over to Studio and changed everything to Symbolic Studio. Started kind of changing all the marketing material and everything to kind of say, hey, we're an animation studio. We do work with agencies. We do work with independent businesses, whoever needs any type of design work done that speaks to motion graphics and animation. Like that's what Symbolic is, and that's where I am with it right now. So that was the tough part, was making that leap. And if you're not planning for something like that a year out, which I wasn't. I mean, it was kind of split decision when I decided to part ways with the agency. So I hadn't really prepared for, starting my own business. It was a choice between, do I want to spend all my time and resources going back to a salary job that's probably going to require me to move because I'm not going to find that type of work, close by. So I would have to get out of Montgomery. And I didn't want to do that at the time. Or do I want to, take a shot and let's go after it and do it? And that's what I did. And man, there's no way I could go back. Now that I'm
Yeah.
5 years into it, there's no way that I could go back. Um, Not just because of the freedom to move, so to speak, that it offers me, but the energy spent, the stress, and all of that goes in with it is my stress and my responsibility. And at the end of the day, I don't mind, sorting that out in my head. Whereas I look back at some of the the energy and the years that I gave up inside of another company, and man, it's almost like getting on the other side of the curtain. You pull the curtain back, and you're like, wow, this is this other world that I can live in, and I didn't see it. So it was definitely something that you had to do to see. You have to kind of do it, experience it to understand it. But it is a different mindset.
Yeah, it
But yeah.
definitely is. So what's kind of been your superpower like through this whole journey of being at peace with being by yourself
Mhm.
and then having to grow the business and really even more than grow the business because you had that the good connection from the previous job that you had. But what's it
Mhm.
just like establishing those processes? Like what did you do well that helped you kind of push the ball down the road?
What did I do well? Um, I don't know. I don't know that I ever really looked at it that way. I kind of followed the thing that I was passionate about and the thing that I've always been hired for, which was motion graphics and animation. So those are the things that I kind of would seek out, whether it was with an agency, or with an independent, business owner. So a lot of, uh, you know, if I'm not doing work now that's specifically project based and work that is on my plate, I'm always looking at what's next, like what's coming, the new technologies that are coming. So I guess I could say that's kind of been my superpower, has been that my passion has always been that I'm 3, 4, and 5 steps ahead of what my clients are thinking. So when I sit down with a client and I have a conversation about how AI is changing, the industry, they have no idea what I'm talking about, but they're fascinated in the sense that it's going to affect their business.
Sure.
For example, the agency that I used to work for, I go to lunch with him like every 6 months, and we just talk shop. We just talk business and agency talk, and what I see and what he sees, and he said a lot of interesting things to me where I was explaining artificial intelligence and how it's text to images and this kind of thing. It was when Midjourney was first bubbling up. And I said, yeah. I said, you'd be amazed. I mean, like what you've been hiring out to do with a copywriter, you could actually sit down and do yourself. Like you don't need to do that anymore. There's a lot of that social media, body copy and things like that you can do with AI now. You don't have to have. And he was like, yeah, but what you don't understand is I don't want to do that. And he's like, and in my mind, like I'm so driven by those technological things that I think, oh wow, everybody else sees what I'm seeing. They see this cool tech in animation, or they see this new real-time engine that's rendering that my brain immediately starts to connect with, oh, well, this project we did 10 years ago would have been awesome if we would have had this tech
Right.
then. Like, how does that apply now? And so, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword for me where I'm kind of blind to, hey, other people don't see it this way. But when I sit down and talk to them about it, they're fascinated and they're like, well, how do I put this in my business? And it's made me stop and think, okay, well, maybe rather than being all hot and heavy into how these new technologies work, how do I make these new technologies work for somebody who doesn't understand it?
Sure.
And so, yeah, that's been something for me, I guess, kind of having my head in the industry and having my head on top of the tools and on top of the technology has been something that's kept me going.
Well, it seems like too is just being very specific, right? Like I think
Mhm.
that anything in the I guess if you widely look at the creative industry, right?
Mhm.
You look all the way from people in the post-production world to set designers. I mean, anything that is in that process of creating or producing something for another human or business or whatever that is, right? I think one of the most common like traps people get stuck in is that they feel like they need to be good at 10 different things to be valuable on a production set or in an agency or in a studio or as a contractor or whatever that may be. Like people get caught in this whirlwind of like, oh, I'm going to go add more skills. Like I'm going to go do
Mhm.
other stuff also. That way, if they hire me for motion graphics, I can also do XYZ.
Right.
And there's something to be said for the fact that you've been as specific as you have about the one thing that you do very well and the
Mhm.
one thing that you're not that you don't do other things well, but just like you spent so much time and energy focused on the one thing and picking apart in your mind how that one thing fits into all these other things that everybody else is doing,
Mhm.
that's kind of a superpower within itself, right? Is not falling into that trap of I need to go and build another 100 skills, or I need to constantly be in this state of learning. Like your small portion of design, there's enough continuous learning and changes in technology that happens to keep you, it's a full-time job just learning what is the most up to date in itself. But I
Yeah.
think that a lot of creatives, especially ones that don't particularly feel like you're very good at that one thing in your industry, I would say it's
Mhm.
almost more valuable to perfect the one thing that you're passionate about than it is to try and put together this, this gamut of 10 different things that you're trying to do for people, because it just makes it more difficult. It's kind of the same thing as your agency to studio transition. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like the more simple that you can keep your solution, the easier it is to describe. A lot of times, that easier it is to sell, and definitely the easier it is to render.
Right.
So that I think within itself is a high level talking point that people should look in the mirror and say, do I spend a lot of time, building or
Right.
focused on these skills that are not my most relevant thing within my business, right? So I
Mhm.
think there's something to be said for that as well. What are some of the obstacles that you've overcome? Like what's kind of been difficult, or if you could go back to day one of kind of being an entrepreneur and give yourself one of those skills that you've developed now, what would it be?
Well, I will say this on what you were just talking about, and this is interesting because I've actually thought about this a lot. When I was originally hired, and I've said this to my wife a lot because we have a soon to be 21-year-old boy and a 14-year-old boy, and I noticed their interaction with technology. It's like you got your phones and your iPads, and computers are starting to kind of take on a different role in their lives than it did, obviously, in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. And, I think, I don't know, the older man in me sees it, and I'm like, man, you guys, you really need to learn about computers because you're missing out on understanding, like how they work, like how the memory works and the hard drives and all this stuff. And then kind of sit and think about it. I'm like, maybe not, like maybe that's a waste of time. But back to the niching and finding that, it was years of being the jack of all trades that the experience of that was invaluable. Like I can look back and all the things that I learned by trying to be a jack of all trades when I was younger, and I could stay up later and I would, go to the studio and learn all the editing systems. And the job that I had in Los Angeles first at the visual effects studio was graphic support. So I would have to support all of the edit bays in the building. So if they needed lower thirds, they needed title cards, any kind of graphics or anything, I would have to support those systems. So I did have to go in and learn the discrete logic editing bay, and I had to learn the Media 100, and I had to learn the Final Cut bays when they got them, and I learned the smoke and how they worked and how you input graphics into them. But for me, that was awesome. I was like, oh yeah, I'm into all of this stuff. Like I'm just going to soak it all up. And now as I'm getting to run my own business, I'm like, okay, that's not a sustainable mindset if I'm wanting to run my own show. And like you said, like I did the agency first, and I quickly found out, okay, I'm going to be just like any other agency if I do this, because I
Right.
haven't been an agency owner. I haven't been, developing my own systems and processes to be a unique agency. But I do have those systems and processes in my head for motion design and animation, and that's my original passion. So all of that in my life up until this point has come full circle. It's I wouldn't get rid of any of those experiences. I wouldn't go back and do any of it differently. If there's one thing I would go back and do differently, it would be starting my own business sooner. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I think that your passion overtakes a lot of that though. Like if you can find, I guess to kind of combat my own point, if you
Mhm.
can find things that you're passionate about in a way that learning it doesn't feel like a chore, right? Because I
Right.
guess it's a lot about energy too. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
if you're trying to learn something for the sake of feeling like you need to learn it, and it makes you feel like you've been sitting in front of a book or a computer for 4 hours, and you look down at your watch and it's been 20 minutes,
Mhm.
like that's probably not. There's probably better ways to spend your time. But if you
Should be the
find
reverse.
yourself, yeah, like if you find yourself like, all right, I'm gonna look at this thing that I may or may not know how to do. I'm gonna look at it for an hour, and if you find yourself 6 hours into it, captivated, continuing to learn and finding value in that,
Right.
I think that we as business owners don't put enough emphasis. Not you and I, but just in general. It's such a transactional thing that a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on passion. Passion can take you a lot of places. Like if there is anything that you can let lead you, and trust that it is going to at least be an entertaining ride. Like
Mhm.
passion is that thing. You know what I mean? Like it's a
Yeah.
crazy thing what you see when people are super passionate about something, what they become capable of. And if you can take that passion and put that energy in the right direction to something that's profitable or productive for you, you can do really, really cool stuff. So I guess there's a mixture there amongst
Mhm.
your left side of your brain's talking to your right side of your brain at some of those point where you're like, all right, I've got to
Right.
combine this passion with the entrepreneurial side of the stuff that I know, and see if we can make it work. And sometimes you got to have that honest conversation of yourself of like, I'm wasting my damn time. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there are probably 20 things that I could be doing more productively than I'm doing right now, trying to learn this thing that I don't enjoy. So
Sure.
yeah, it's a little bit of give and take, and it's learned behavior as well. Like I wouldn't I am definitely not the guy that's going to tell you don't open the book because you might not want to learn it. Like, give it a try, try all
Right.
kinds of stuff. But it comes down to that, the thing that you said, it's like, I'm going to be just like everybody else if I try to continue to be everything for everybody, right? And the more
Right.
specific that you can be in solving that problem, at least the more clearly defined the deliverable is going to be for the people that you're working with, right?
Right.
At least you're going to
Yeah.
be
And
able to know the one thing you do well,
right.
right?
And I think the best way that I've seen to describe exactly what you're talking about is, had I continued down the agency route, my method of getting new business would be to constantly be reaching out, constantly, traditional sales, knocking on
Sure.
doors, sending emails, talking to people, getting meetings, finding out what their problems are, trying to solve those problems. And that's great. But the vision that I had in my mind, and the one that I still have in my mind for Symbolic as an animation, 3D design animation studio, is I want the work to bring in the business. So yes, I still explore sales, and I've I have a system in place now that's kind of bringing in people to do some sales for me. But I still want that driver to be, wow, look at this animation. Like we want to work with these people. Not what are we pitching on this week? Not
Oh yeah.
what are we doing free work for this week? And I just I don't see that being a space that I want to be in. So yeah, I mean that is kind of a defining factor, and it's something that I've had to explain to my wife. When she says, why are you always working? And I'm like, well, some of it's work, but probably 90% of it is not work. It's just something that I'm absolutely fascinated and passionate about. And so I jump up off the couch and I come in my office randomly because I had an idea for something, and I
Right.
need to put it in place. I need to put a task on the board. I need to make sure that I don't forget it, because it means a lot to me. And it means, you know, that it's feeding uh, my hunger for these things that I'm interested in. So definitely relate to what you're talking about, though. I mean, and I've explained it to my 14-year-old son, which I got him into video games, and I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing, but
Hmm.
I tell him when he's had a good session of Call of Duty or whatever he's playing, I'm like, it seems like you're up there for 30 minutes, but you were up there for like 2 hours. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, I don't know. And I tell him, I'm like, one day you're gonna find something that you love doing, not video games, right now.
Yeah.
You're going to find something you love doing, and you're going to find that same time effect where it
Oh
just
yeah.
vanishes. And like that's when that's something that you can be passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's something that happens to everybody. Everybody finds that thing that
Mhm.
makes time fly. They say time flies when you're having fun, but I don't even think having fun is enough of it. Like, it's it's a strange thing that your brain does whenever it decides, I just really don't want to think about how much time I've spent doing this thing. I just want to keep doing it. And when you can
Right.
find those things, it makes you strangely, that is a superpower within itself, right? It's like finding that
Yeah.
passion. It makes you capable of things that you weren't before, because your mind is so open to things. I just think you get more out of yourself when you find things
Mm.
that align with what you are passionate about. Honestly,
Yeah.
from an
It's
entrepreneurial
that
perspective or self perspective, whatever it may be.
it's that flow state, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Get in that flow, and it's like, okay, well, time just kind of stands still, and you come out of it, and it's 4 hours later.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
uh, well, tell me this: how do people, if they want to buy something
Huh?
from you, how do the people find you?
The website is symbolic.studio. So, www.symbolic.studio. I'm on LinkedIn, just my personal brand. Me personally, I'm on LinkedIn. The business page is on there, but I use LinkedIn and in a way to kind of write in the morning. So I'll typically post, 3 or 4 times a week, and it's about stuff in the industry. So if you're interested in learning more about how I think, LinkedIn's a good place to find me. But yeah, demo reel, some of the previous work that we've done is up on the site. It's due for an update, with the new subscription being out now for a year and a half. There's some new stuff coming to the site that's going to kind of zero things in. But yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, just go to the site. You can definitely grab me there.
And the way that we always end the podcast is to talk about kind of the ode to our name, right?
Mm.
And I want to ask you this: what does it feel like to burn the ship? You know, what is the mental change that happens to you, and what do you get out of it emotionally when you make that shift from being inside of an agency or inside of a studio or being an employee or whatever that may be? What is the mental experience of becoming an entrepreneur, of flipping that light switch and deciding, okay, I'm going to go through this stuff that everybody tells me is really, really hard for whatever reason,
Mm.
and I'm going to come out the other side of it and I'm going to do really well. Like, what is the what is the benefit to that, especially because a lot of the audience is probably in that place now where they're constantly 6 months away from starting their business. You know, they're kicking the
Mm.
can just far enough down the road because there's not a lot of places to find the answers to what are the ABC steps of starting a business and doing it successfully, right? So, just from your perspective, what does it feel like? You know, what is that experience like, and why should other people seek it out?
I think it's, kind of going back to what we said at the beginning. It's the kind of, I always refer to it as a curtain. It's like I pulled back a curtain once I stepped out. But to get me to the stepping out point, um, the most vivid thing I can remember was making a list of pros and cons. Like what is my life going to look like if I continue to try to be inside of an agency or inside of a studio? What does my salary look like? What are the pros and the cons of that life? And what are the benefits and the same for running my own studio? If I want to do it myself, like what does that look like? What are the possibilities, pros and cons? And if you're really honest with yourself, they're both going to have a lot of cons.
Yeah, yeah,
They're both going to have a
yeah,
lot of cons. So I mean, it's really looking at like what do I think I have the grit to bear and get this done, And if you like the security of being inside of a company, I completely understand that. But I would say this, it's not as, and I'm not trying to scare anybody off, but this is just a reality of it. It's not as secure as you think it is.
no, it's
It's
not.
only secure because you're getting a consecutive paycheck or, a salary and it's consecutive. That feels secure, but that can go away like that.
Oh yeah, it almost
Um,
lures you to sleep.
yeah, it is a
You know what I mean?
complacency, big time. And I've been there. I've been there in several reorderings of companies, especially out in Los Angeles. It would happen all the time. They would buy a new company, and everybody would be like, "Oh, am I going to lose my job?"
Hmm.
And then they wouldn't, and you'd be like, "Ah," and you go right back into that complacency of
Mm-hmm.
and and that's not to say that that's a bad thing. I mean, some people like that workflow. They like going home and not thinking about work. Um, I don't think that's the mindset that you have if you're passionate about something. I think you're always, like I tell my wife, like I don't look at it as work. I mean, this is just something that I love to do, and I think about it all the time. So it is a leap of faith kind of thing. You have to, kind of really have um, a meeting with yourself and figure out, do I want to do this? I highly recommend building some runway cash if you can. Getting that 6 month padding out there. That's something that I wish I would have done, but I didn't. So it was really a tightrope with no net kind of situation for me,
Sure.
and I managed to get past that first year. And once that first year passed, I was like, all right, I think I'm going to be okay. It's
Yeah.
like because I really came out like shotgun start, and because and honestly, like that was the switch. I was like, I'm tired of thinking about it. Like, dadgummit, I'm going to do this, and just bam, got a I think I got who was it that does all the business startup with like LegalZoom,
Yeah.
right? Called LegalZoom and told them I was like, this is what I'm wanting to do, and they're like, oh, okay, we'll put this package, and then we'll get you an LLC started, and uh, and yeah, it worked out great. Of course they bugged me for like weeks after that, and they're like, yeah, you can pay us 15 grand a month, and we'll do your books. And I was like, no, 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 no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I needed to get the business started, and you guys were perfect for that. Now leave me alone.
Uh,
So yeah.
yeah. It's a It's hard to, and everyone kind of goes about it and looks at it from a different perspective, but it's honestly refreshing to see, just getting driven by passion. It's like all the people that we look up to, that their story is that, right? Like all of
Mm,
the athletes and all the super super successful people is they find this passion and they just attack it full speed, right?
right.
And one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is that people always find a way, the guest always finds a way to say, but it's not all sunshine and daisies. Like you need runway cash. You need to have a realistic expectation of what happens if this doesn't go well, right?
Right.
And you don't get a lot of that when you look across the internet at entrepreneurship stuff. So if there is anything that tells the people that are listening to this podcast how truly organic these interactions are that we have with people, it's
Mm,
like that you don't find a whole lot of that. You don't find people telling you to be wary of the thing that you are so passionate and you are so decided about doing, right? It's like there
mm,
there has to be, this profile of risk for
mm,
every entrepreneur. And if you aggregated it and averaged it out, I would say that entrepreneurs are not, averse to risk, right? People
mm.
are okay
No
with
doubt.
taking that risk and with working really hard and finding that passion and make things happen. And you can do the same thing. Like you can put yourself in that same mental place. You can pick one thing to be really, really good at. You can surround yourself with people. And if I had to give a piece of advice like some runway cash, is build your network. It is one of the
No
most
doubt.
valuable things that you can do that is absolutely free to do everything in your power to go and meet people, whether they're in your industry, whether they're in a different industry, whether they're a potential customer for you, whatever that looks like. Um, Building up your network and having people to call on and ask questions to and potentially get referrals from is such a valuable thing that I see people, go through this whole process of getting an LLC and setting up a website and spending a bunch of money and they say, all right, I'm going to go start telling people about it, right?
Right.
Find ways to give yourself any head start that you can and stay passionate for as long as possible.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to do a different thing, right? Like, don't be afraid to be a
Yeah.
year into your journey and make a different thing because it's not in line with you. You don't know. We don't know. And the biggest thing that I can tell you is that there are people like myself and people like Joe that are here to give you, I don't know if we're qualified to give advice, but I can tell you what I've done wrong, right? Like I can at
Mm,
least tell you the stories of what I've gone through. I'm sure you can relate to that, and I'm sure
sure.
you're much more qualified to advise entrepreneurs than me. But um, it's just trying to find a way to balance the things that we experience as humans, the things that our brain convinces us of, and these patterns that we go through, and trying to replicate that in a business sense, right? And it seems like you've done a
Mm,
really, really good job of that, of being a business owner that's passionate about what you do, that takes care of your connections and manifests that into something good. So it's a pretty simple formula. It seems like you've been very consistent about it for a long time. So I appreciate you being on the podcast and giving us some point of reference as far as what it looks like to kind of, combine creativity and passion with a little bit of entrepreneurship and business savvy as well. So I hope some people reach out to you. If there's
yeah.
anybody else that you're looking to be connected with that's in my network or people that we've had on the podcast before, people that we will have, please let me know.
Sure.
I pride ourselves in the ability to create some of those connections for people. So thank you. I appreciate it. If you have any advice to leave the people with, please, the platform is yours. But I just want to say thank you for coming again. It does mean a lot.
Yep. Sounds great. Yeah. I mean, kind of passing off on the advice. I would say, I love communicating and connecting with people. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Send me an email from the website. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about, if you're thinking about going out on your own or anything like that. I'm not a very closed off person, so I love talking about stuff like that. So yeah, be glad to chat.
Well, I appreciate it. It means a lot, my
You know,
friend. Cool.
appreciate you
Well,
having me on.
yeah, anytime. Burn the ship.